Welcome to another podcast by the Mummy and Me app. The Mummy and Me app enables positive pregnancy outcomes for all. This week, the focus is on Black Baby Loss Awareness Week and Mental Health Awareness Week. Unfortunately, Black women are 4 times more likely to die during pregnancy, and Black babies now have the highest mortality rate and are twice as likely to be stillborn or die within the first 28 days after birth. This episode will be talking about baby loss, life after loss, and the support available. Hello everyone. Today we're honoured to be joined today by Funke Oham. She's been on the podcast before, but we're really pleased to have her.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Good to be back again.
So to begin, Funke, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, sure. So I'm a mom of 4, and I say 4 because I've got 2 heavenly babies and 2 teenagers, and that dates back to my baby loss experience about 18 years ago. So based on that experience, I'm very passionate about supporting other women on this journey, and as a result of that, I set up an initiative called Always a Mom. So to support other women who are trying to conceive or have experienced baby loss as well. And as part of that support package, I have also written 2 books, one called Always a Mom, How I Survived My Baby Loss. And the second one is a recent memoir, I believe, a mother's memoir of lost hope and trusting again. As part of my work in this space, I also write for some Christian magazines, Keep the Faith and Women Alive, so to encourage others on this journey and also to raise awareness of baby loss and infertility so that others are more empathetic to others who are walking in these shoes and they know how to support them. Outside of these roles, I also mentor others, and I've also won some awards along the way and also coach others. So that's a bit about me.
Thank you. And we'll include links to her books and some of her published works as well in the show notes. Funke, could you tell us a bit about your pregnancy and maternity experience?
Okay, sure. So like I touched on that I have 2 heavenly babies. So back in 2006, what was meant to be the happiest day of my life turned to be a nightmare, so to say, when I went into hospital, and my expectation was to come out of hospital with my bundle of joy. So that was a day I had dreamed of, thought about it in many ways in my head. I mean, from going through many antenatal appointments, I'd seen women, also walk out of the hospital with their babies in a car seat. So that I always had that mental picture that would be me one day. But on going into hospital at about 40 weeks, what was meant to be a straightforward labor turned into something else when I was told that there was no heartbeat and my baby had died. Apparently, I had preeclampsia, which I was told was sudden, and I never even knew what that meant. Even though I'd seen posters in the hospital about it, I never paid attention because I thought, well, maybe that's nothing, and that's not something that will happen to me. And I never even knew what it was all about till it came knocking on my door. And I guess the following days, months, and weeks brought a lot of questions around it in terms of why me, why did this happen to me? What happened, in terms of the hospital? Did they not pick up the signs? Why was this missed? And then, in our opinion, there was a bit of negligence as well during labor. And I had to live with the repercussion of losing a baby and walk that journey, something I never expected to encounter in my life. And I guess that loss is not something anyone prepares you for, and I had to leave that out. And I think a few months down the line, we were ready to try again. And I think we were blessed that we didn't have to wait in terms of conception compared to the first time where we had a 16 months wait. So I got pregnant quite quickly, and I was really looking forward to it. And I wanted a baby girl. I just felt that would differentiate the experience because I had a son first time round. And I was so delighted to find out that we were having a girl. And I thought I'll do things differently this time around. You know, what can I do to prevent anything like this happening? So I'll take it easy, slow down, leave work early. And at 23 weeks, just the day before my maternity leave, I was at work and I started having pains. And I thought, this is a bit strange, but I thought I'll keep an eye. Called my husband. He said, well, you know, keep an eye. And then if it continues, call the consultant, which I did later on. And he said he was abroad, but, you know, go to the hospital if it intensifies, which I did later on after getting home. And then I began to think to myself, it looks like labor pains based on the amount of pain I was in. And also I began to have back pain, which was similar to the symptoms I had with the first pregnancy. And on getting to hospital, we were told, you know, there was nothing they could do. I was fully dilated and the baby will be coming out shortly. And I thought, how can the baby be coming out 23 weeks? But I just had this sense of assurance within me that, you know, she'll survive, she'll come through. And we'll go home with a miracle baby. But alas, 10 hours later, she was gone. And then I found myself in the same position. I couldn't believe that this could happen to me twice in a row. So that was kind of how my journey began in terms of baby loss, and I had to navigate all of that. But I guess we'll talk about that as we go along.
Thank you for sharing your experience, because I know that it's hard to retell your story again and again. But thank you for doing that for us. So this week is Mental Health Awareness Week, as well as Baby Loss Awareness Week. And we know that mental health can be impacted in multiple ways throughout the pregnancy journey, despite whatever the outcome is. How did you look after your mental health after the loss?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite difficult, but I think one of the key things I did was talk about it with my husband. So we had open conversations, and it was a safe space for me to talk about it. And my mom was around then, but I just didn't want to burden her because I think she was feeling the impact herself, and she was there with me, you know, during delivery. So I spoke more to my husband because I was hopefully maybe in my head trying to protect my mom, and I thought it was more my husband and I's problem. But I think in hindsight, it's very much everyone's. Everyone that is close to you is touched by the loss, and they all feel it in different ways. But I think at that point, I just thought I need to protect my mom, and she's been through a lot already. So I spoke a lot more to my husband, and we talked a lot, you know, in terms of, you know, our hopes, our dreams, and the loss that we had faced, and the shattered dreams for us. So talking for me was really helpful. Because of my Christian faith, I also prayed, I also meditated, because I had to understand why this had to happen to me from a faith perspective. So I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of, you know, reading scriptures. I did a lot of meditating. Music is something, is my go-to in my low moments. So I listen to a lot of, I call them worship music or gospel music. That really helped lift up my soul and encourage me. And I think, to me, music is so powerful that sometimes when you can't put things into words, music does that for you and has a way of lifting up, you know, your kind of weary soul, so to say. So music, and I also did a lot of journaling and writing, you know, what had happened to me, you know, what I was looking forward to, and what was helping me through that process. So journaling was quite powerful. I don't think I was really into exercise then, so I don't think I did a lot of walking, but I guess if it was now, exercise would have played a key part as well.
I think, exercise is one of those funny things where unfortunately it is one of the things that afterwards you do feel a lot better. And people say it's often because you can switch off, because you're like walking or running or doing something else. And you touched on it a bit about your support network. Do you think more could be done to support and also empower like the wider support community of the person who's given birth?
Yeah, well, support is so key. You know, it's kind of funny because when I was going through it, at some points I felt, yes, I've got support. And at some points I felt, you know, I was all abandoned, because it's a very difficult place to be in grief. And I think, you know, people will be supportive in the early stages. And as time goes on, people begin to unknowingly withdraw support because they've got their own lives as well, and life, as I say, continues. I would probably say I did feel supported because people did call, people did visit, and sometimes I would say I'm not ready for a visit or I don't want to speak to anybody, and some people took offense with that. So I think, in terms of support sometimes is knowing when to give it and when not to give it, because sometimes people need their space or they just want to be by themselves. We had, people that sent cards, and many times I'll go back, pick up those cards and read those words, and sometimes they'll make me cry, but they also made me feel loved and the fact that people were thinking about us, so I think cards were quite a good thing that I found useful. Text messages, I would go back and read them, because I think I'm someone that reflects a lot. So in those down moments, I'll pick things like that. I'll pick up the text messages and, look at the cards again. I think the other thing in terms of support, is like I said, looking at the long term. So also supporting people as time goes on, not just in the immediate days and weeks, because as the months go by, as the years go by, so things like anniversaries are very important. Sometimes I am African as well as British, but within an African culture, sometimes they don't want to talk about things like this. People want to kind of brush under the carpet and kind of tell you to move on or think about other children or don't think about this thing. So I think saying their names, remembering birthdays. I think in those early days, people would probably remember their anniversary, but nowadays nobody remembers the anniversary of my son's death. So it's not a big thing for me, but for some people it's a big thing. They want their babies to be remembered on special occasions. Yeah. For us, we do whatever, we do our own later thing. In the early days, we used to go to the graveside, but now we don't do a lot of that because I have this concept of, my children are not just in a physical location, they are alive. So I see I kind of connect, or not just by being in a physical space, but knowing that they are alive. So, but for some people, it's very important that their babies are remembered on birthdays and on special occasions. So I think these are some of the things I would kind of touch on.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask a question about health advocacy. So unfortunately, there's still evidence of women, unfortunately, not being listened to, being ignored, not being given an informed choice. What role can health advocacy play in empowering birthing people and their partners?
Okay. So it's a good thing you did touch on partners as well, because I always, I'm very particular about ensuring that partners are involved as well. So as much as it's a woman's body, men also want to be involved, in terms of this decision making and being involved in those conversations. So in terms of health advocacy, I think it's quite important in empowering women. I think the first key thing is people knowing that, knowing what their rights are and that they have a right to ask for them, and I think it's about having access to the tools that they need to help them advocate effectively. So I think it's a very powerful concept, and I think I was at an event earlier on today, and it's Black Baby Loss Awareness Week, like you touched on, and I think one of the key things, when you hear stories over and over again, it touches your heart that even though my experience was nearly 2 decades ago, we're still talking about the same things. People are still dealing with these things in isolation. There's still a lack of awareness. So I think that awareness of, these things even happen is the first step. That, baby loss happens. Also that the inequalities when it comes to people's ethnic backgrounds, so statistics does show that people from a Black background do suffer more when it comes to loss and infertility. So I think health advocacy is important, that even within our communities, we keep talking so people know that these things happen. And if it does happen to you, what can you do? Where can you go to for support? And who can you, reach out to? And what tools do you have? So I think the awareness piece is so important because people are sometimes walking this journey in the dark and they have no clue. They don't know what to do. They don't know who to speak to. And also when you hit a brick wall, what do you do and where do you turn to? I think having this, it is important, and knowing where to go is very crucial.
Thank you. Yeah, because people often say that you feel like you understand like the health system and where to go for things. But yeah, often at times, it might be different depending on where you live. You might have different access. And there might be more community groups you can access. So yeah, you make a really good point about getting the knowledge and also sharing it as well.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to go back a second because I remember you spoke about journaling. Okay. Did the journals feed into the books that you wrote?
Okay. Well, some of it. So I think with the books I wrote, with the first one that I published, it was actually started off as a blog. So the blog actually became the book, and then it was kind of adapted for that audience. So it was more the blog, and then the blog became the book. With my memoir, it was a book I kind of started off with intent of making it a book. So yeah, some of my journals, I think I did reflect on my journals in terms of remembering dates and things. Because when I started writing I wrote my book I think probably 2010, 2011. And when I got to actually publish it last year, I had to review the whole manuscript again. And, I think with time, you sometimes forget things and dates and all of that. So, yes, I think the journal was useful in terms of cross-referencing information and then just as a reflective piece as well on my journey.
Thank you. And did you find that women have also come to you and said that book was helpful for them through a loss, or for them being there, I guess for women and men, saying that the book's been there for them in supporting people who've experienced loss too?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the first book, because that is kind of a few years back now, I've had people kind of read them and reread them again, and I think someone bought it for he and his wife, and then he bought like 10 copies, which I was really touched by. And then I went to a networking event many years ago, and I just was talking with someone in the audience, and we kind of I think she kind of touched on my book and my name, and she kind of said, "Oh, you know what? We got the book and we used it as in a support group, and we all bought a copy and we read through the book together." And that really touched me because I never knew people did things like that. Yeah. So I think that was really touching, and I do get people. Someone recently. She bought my book a while back, and a friend of hers went through a recent loss, and she passed it on to her friend to read. So hearing that people are actually reading them and referring it on to others or buying others a copy, does gladden my heart that I'm raising awareness and helping others. And people do buy them because they're curious and they want to understand how to support others in their families that have been through this, or they're just curious because they want to know what it's like to walk in this in my shoes. It is helpful for others, and it's good that people are actually spreading the word as well and passing it on.
Yeah, because I guess also it's often hard to know what to say or what to do, like you said. But yeah, your book will be like a useful insight for people who are looking for ways to support those around them. And on the subject of support, was there anything that you found particularly helpful through your loss?
Yeah. So, definitely. So I think just having people around, people that were empathetic, people that allowed me to cry, because sometimes people will say, "Stop crying." Of course, it's from a place of love, but sometimes you also need to express your emotions and the grief you feel. So people that allowed me to cry when I wanted to cry. In terms of support, one of my husband's friends in the early days when he found out with our first loss, referred us to a friend of his that was a gynecologist. I think that was the best thing that we got, because even we met with his doctor friend and we just talked through our experience. And just, when you want a sounding board and you just think, are we going crazy because we feel that there was a lot of negligence in this situation. And because we were not medical, because, we do know that with losses, especially for Black babies, there's a lot of cover-up, with hospitals. And we just wanted that extra pair of eyes and someone that knew the system and someone that understood the medical terms to just have a look. And I think having that conversation with him was one of the most beneficial things we got in terms of support. And then he later went on to refer us to a hospital in London, because he was based outside London, to another consultant friend of his that could take care of me when I became pregnant the second time. And that really was really helpful. Yeah, so I think, I touched on things like people sending notes and cards, that did help as well. And I think in terms of support, I was just really grateful that I had a very supportive family, especially my in-laws. Coming from an African background, you do hear horrible stories of people who really unkind to women, especially when things like this happen, or they kind of attribute it to different things. And sometimes, unfortunately, in some homes, they might actually ask the man to divorce the wife because, maybe she's got bad luck or things like that. But I never had any issue with my in-laws, not even once throughout the time of even infertility, of waiting for a baby, and also the two losses in a row. So I'm just so grateful. So it wasn't direct support, but it was the love and the care, and just not prying into our business and asking what's going on, what's happening here. And I also, because sometimes people kind of start asking loads of questions, what's happening, are you not doing anything, what are you up to? So I didn't have any of the interference, and I think for me that was a big support and relief, and I didn't have to worry about that on top of all the other things that were going on.
No, yeah, and you're right. You do, and I'm not sure if it's the Nollywood films that don't help, but yeah, you definitely do hear about awful stories of in-laws making things worse during that time. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really happy for you that yours were so supportive. Yeah. And I just have another question around support. So I know nowadays there seems to be a lot more support for partners and extended family who are experiencing baby loss. But when you experienced your losses, was there support available for your husband or your mother?
Very good question. I think well, I don't think there were any spaces for men. I don't think I ever came across anything like that, because I did attend like a science group, and we're all women. I attended a couple of sessions, so all women in the group. And yeah, men do cry, men do feel loss as well. And it makes it even more complicated because men are not expressive in that sense when it comes to things like loss. So not having the spaces like that, I don't think there were any to my knowledge. I mean, all the groups I kind of found online were all for women. Things are beginning to change a lot more. I mean, in this day and in this age where you have, men groups, you have sessions for couples, you have men, talking more about their experience and being more open. I've seen a couple of books from a men's perspective as well in terms of loss and infertility. But I think in those days, there wasn't that much. In terms of my mom, we never really talked about a lot of things. And, then now that, I do a lot of work in this space, with others who are going through this journey, she's quite supportive and she does attend quite a number of my meetings. But we never really had that, an in-depth conversation, but I do know that she probably needed support. And I don't think there was that space for her to actually discuss her grief and what she'd been through, because it was really traumatic for her. I think it's more difficult for parents because they feel very helpless and they can't help their children. And I don't think she had that support or that space was there for her to actually discuss things like that. And I think, while she was here, because she lives in Nigeria, probably more concerned about me than herself. And going back home, I guess it's there was nowhere to discuss that. So I think for parents, they also need support, and more increasingly, I'm beginning to know that also siblings also need support if there are other children in the family as well. I mean, I was lucky; I didn't have any children, so I didn't have the complication of thinking about looking after if there were other children in the family. So it was just ourselves as a couple. But yeah, so I think it's a bigger picture, and there are many people that are affected when a baby dies.
Yeah, and I guess also how you'd explain it to a child, especially if they're young, and they thought a sibling was coming, and now they're not, and parents may not feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a good thing. I think there are charities that are available that do support parents with conversations like that, and also provide support for the family as a unit.
Oh, that's good. So loss and grief journeys are different for everyone. Do you have advice on how people can support loved ones, colleagues and friends, particularly around birthdays, anniversaries, Mother's Days and Father's Days?
Okay, sure. I think the first thing is, like you did say, that everyone's experience is totally different, and how people process grief or how long it takes for them to, maybe smile again or kind of adapt to their new normal will vary from person to person. So I think it's giving people time and space, and knowing that, maybe one person may have been able to transition to their new reality within a faster timeline than others. So I think it's knowing that loss is individual and giving everyone time and space. And I think I was listening to a recording recently, and this mom had been through multiple losses, and she was saying the time for each loss was slightly different. So same woman, but she had kind of set herself, with the first one, maybe it took her 2 years to get to a place where she was able to kind of breathe again and smile again. And with the second loss, it was much longer. So even expectations for the same individual might be different if people have been through multiple losses. So I think it's recognizing that. I think that's the first thing. I think also being kind to them and giving, and respecting their boundaries. So if they don't want to attend things, or they don't want to celebrate in a certain way, or they don't want to remember their children in a certain way, it's not imposing our ideas and thoughts on them. And also even between partners, sometimes the way the husband and the partner or the wife and her spouse will process loss and grief will be slightly different. So it's also, accommodating each other's needs and respecting that.
Yeah.
So this is not even talking about external relationships, even within the family units. Even the couple may process it slightly different and in different ways. And just, being mindful of that, and there's no right or wrong way, and giving everyone the space to grieve in the way they would like to. Also, asking how people feel, I think, is very important. I think we have this thing where we ask people, how are you? And we kind of automatically expect to hear fine and move on. But when there's a pause, there's a silence, and there's a different response, people are not really prepared for that. And we don't always have to have an answer. We don't always have to know what to say. But I think just being present with them in that moment and listening and being empathetic does go a long way. So in terms of special occasions, remembering them. So people may like to remember it in different ways. You probably could send a card, send a note to say that you're thinking of them on that day. And if you do know the names of the baby or babies, we can refer to them and say their name. So saying their name is something that a lot of women acknowledge that they want heard. They don't want their babies forgotten. They don't want the babies kind of, to be out of mind, even though they're out of sight. So saying their names it's a very powerful thing, and recognizing that they were part of that family and that they existed. Also, in terms of practical things, things which, shopping, with, chores in the house, so that give them time away to relax or to do things that, especially when they have other children, some of these things can be quite overwhelming. So recognizing that those days, also things like Mother's Day and Father's Day, some people find it very hard, and just being sensitive around days like that, and being thoughtful. And being kind, and little gifts could also go a long way as well, especially if you know what they like. We could also think about little gifts.
Thanks. One thing, I think maybe it started, a lot of things started during lockdown, but I think maybe it did start during lockdown, was a lot of brands now say Mother's Day or Father's Day is coming up. Do you want to receive emails about it? And you can opt out of it, which I think is really... It's one of those things where I'm like, oh, why didn't this exist before? But I'm really happy that it does, because like you say, it will impact people in different ways and mean things for different people. And I do like that you said you were a mum of 4, because like you say, you are a mum of 4, and it's good to remember all your children.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, sometimes I would say I'm a mom of 2, because people are not ready for that conversation.
That's true.
And sometimes I would say I'm a mom of 4. So, but whichever way, to me, if I do say I'm a mom of two, does not deny the existence of my children, because I do know in my heart. But sometimes I say I'm a mom of four to also raise awareness and also let people know that even though they're not here, they are still here with me, and they're part of our lives.
Yeah, and they're part of your family, like
Absolutely.
you said. Someone wrote a blog for Mother's Day, and I really loved one of the lines she put in it. Her daughter passed away, and she was saying that she'll always be a mum, and she'll always be her child's mum, which I thought was so powerful and beautiful.
Absolutely. And that's the title of my first book, Always a Mom, because that was where the concept came from. Because people sometimes indirectly or unknowingly kind of think because your child isn't here, you're not a mom anymore. And I think I wanted to make that statement. And I wanted to also emphasize to myself that even though my son wasn't here, later my daughter, but they were still my children and I will always be their mom. So yeah, absolutely. I love that too.
And you spoke about the work you do, apart from your books, but coaching, and you also were talking about groups you work with. What motivated you to do so much to support others with their pregnancy experiences?
Yeah, I think it was, a couple of things, because I found a very isolating experience when I went through what I went through. I mean, things have changed significantly, but people still say, there's still not enough support. So, but looking back 2 decades ago, I mean, it was really hard. There were no spaces. I mean, all the only spaces I found were online, and there were spaces that they were not catered for me in terms of being Black and being Christian. And sometimes I would go online, I'll come back after reading all the comments and all the things people have been through. I'll end up crying and even be more sad, because I couldn't understand how people could go through all of this. But there was no hope in all the things I was reading. So the hope element for me was missing. Also, the fact that I didn't see anyone like me in those groups was also missing. And also the fact that many people just felt so alone. And, found the journey really difficult, because I'm a very positive person, and I was into a lot of women empowerment prior to, pregnancy and then losing my baby. So I wanted a safe space. I wanted a space where I could actually, express myself, but also live with a bit of glimmer of hope and that things will be okay, even though I didn't know how it was going to transpire. So I think those were the things that motivated me. And no one was talking about loss. And I just thought, if I went through all of this, there are a lot of things that need to be said. There are a lot of things that I needed to offload a lot of things. And apart from my husband, I just felt I didn't have the right space to do that. And I didn't want anyone to walk through this journey alone. So even for me, it was a very big step, because I always say I'm a very private person. So to even talk about my story, I mean, there are a lot of things I never told people. So even, for instance, even when I started my period, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell a soul, not even my friends, not even my mom, not even my cousins. And I was very close to my cousins. So if I couldn't tell anyone that, then to expose my whole life and my infertility journey was a big deal for me. But I just felt it had to be told, because I didn't want anyone to walk through this journey on their own. And I just felt I could be a source of hope as well to all those maybe coming after me.
No, thank you. And you spoke about this a few times, but creating a safe space to have these discussions. Do you have any tips for people who are trying to create these spaces in their communities?
Yeah, very good question. I think, I mean, I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do things. I think it's about your heart and wanting to help. And I think, I learned as I went along. So I started the journey, and it was more like, I just want to help others. And I just started by just sharing my story. So I think the first time I went public was on the 15th of October, 2011, with a blog, and it was titled "You're Not Alone." And I didn't know what to expect. I I just thought I'll just put it out there. And I started blogging every week, once a week for a couple of, I did that for about a year plus. And people just started reaching out to me. And that's how we all started. Could you speak to my friend? She's going through something similar. Could you speak to my cousin? And that's how we started. And one thing led to another. So I think it's just starts. There's no perfect recipe. People do it in different ways. Some people set up an event. Some people would do a blog. Some people have an Instagram page. I think the main thing is knowing why you want to do it and just starting with a small idea and building it up from there. I think one of the things I'm also very keen in recent years is also collaborating. There's a lot of us doing so many things in this space. And I was just, the event I went to earlier on, I was just talking about, we need to make more impact. And I was speaking to another lady who is a midwife, and she has an initiative. And I was just saying that, the more of us come together, and that was the conversation we were having, the more impact we can have in terms of changing policies, in terms of making a difference, in terms of outcomes for Black families. So I think the other thing is also coming together, yes, doing our own little things in little spaces, but also becoming a force that can be reckoned with, that we can bring change in a big way. Because for us, we are most affected as Black people, and the statistics are really shocking. It is painful, and I spoke to a few people, some people that just had a loss 2 months ago, someone that had a loss in 2022, and for me, every loss I hear of, every story I hear of, it grieves my heart that this is still happening nearly 2 decades after my own loss. So I think it's about us kind of working together. And making change together, I think we will have more impact. So I think for me, it's about, yes, us doing our own little things, but also working together to bring about bigger impact and change.
Thank you. And no, you're right. Because, for a long time it was the statistics for Black women were 5 times more likely to die during pregnancy. And now it's 4, but it really should be 0.
Absolutely.
So yeah, like you said, like people have come together to bring it down to 4. We need to amplify our voices and our forces and bring it down even further and a lot faster.
Absolutely. I do agree. Yeah.
Particularly around avoidable deaths as well,
yes.
Because they shouldn't happen at all. So I completely agree with you. And then, did you have anything else you wanted to share with the listeners and viewers before we close?
Okay. I would say, if you're walking this journey, and you've been through loss, I just want to say I'm sorry for your loss, and just to let you know that you're not alone. The other thing, for those on the outside, come closer, don't be afraid. It's important that we educate ourselves and we become more aware. So in terms of what people are going through, so how we can support them better, how we can be there for them, and also how we can avoid saying the wrong things and be more empathetic. I think that raising awareness piece is so important. I think I did have a conversation, a while back about, some of these conversations need to be had even in primary and secondary schools, and they need to be age appropriate, because many times we're teaching kids all about different things, but we're not teaching things, and people are not prepared, for things like this. The lady I mentioned, I spoke to that just had a loss 2 months ago, said, she had no clue. She never knew this would happen to her. She had no clue about things like this. And that's a lot of us tend to echo that. Sometimes we are aware that, loss happens, but we never understand we never grasp the depths of things like this. And people kind of walk into it so unprepared and so and it hits them big time. No matter how much you prepare, of course, you can never prepare for loss. But I think the awareness piece is so important, that people are more aware. Even like you said, avoidable deaths. What should you look out for? What is good health care and what isn't good maternity care? How can I effectively advocate for myself? What is right and what isn't right? What am I entitled to, and when should I be speaking up? And I think that many times these deaths are unavoidable, and if we are not aware, or society are not aware, or young people are not aware. Even one of the things I was actually saying, because I do a bit of work with churches, is, when we talk about marriage counseling, some of these conversations need to be heard in sessions like that. Because some people, when they go through infertility, they're not prepared, for the long wait. They don't know how to handle that. And unfortunately, some people, for some marriages, they end in divorce because of the pressure and the stress of infertility and the journey and the challenges it comes with. So some of these conversations, I believe, need to be had much younger, much earlier. I mean, nobody wants to go through this. Everyone kind of thinks, don't talk about it because I don't want that to happen to me. But I think awareness is so important that if at all we find ourselves, or we know somebody, a colleague, a friend, a sister, a neighbor, we know how to be there for them, and we know how to support them. And unfortunately, if we do find ourselves in those positions, we know where to go. We know where to access support. And hopefully we can navigate this a bit better than when we walk into it without any idea. So I think, that's, and I would say read a lot. People talk about their stories, their events. Be curious, with our space, the waiting room, which we hold once a month. One of the things I began to do was open it up to everybody. It began as a space for only those going through infertility and baby loss. But one of the things we do is we open it up to everyone. So you can come in and listen. You are permitted to listen. You're permitted to join in. And you would feel safe and you'll feel comfortable. So I think some of the spaces we need to open them up so people actually feel comfortable and it doesn't become a taboo. It's no longer a stigma. And because these issues are stigma in society, they're taboos. No one talks about it. No one knows how to respond. No one knows how to react. And the more we make it more open, and we open up our hearts and our lives for those of us that have walked through this journey, the more we make it easier for others to begin to understand or have a sense of what it is we're going through and how they can support more. And so I think it's just being curious and also being more empathetic as we learn about issues like this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you again, Funke, for joining us for another podcast. And thanks to everyone for listening. And we wish you all a good day and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.